I'm going to be making a tier maker video on the Studio Ghibli films. These films are a little bit hard to rank in tier maker because they're mostly all so good. They're all pretty much in the top tiers since Studio Ghibli really doesn't do bad films. But I'm going to try to rank them out into the tiers and talk a little bit about each one. So first here we have Porco Rosso, and that one's going to go straight to the S tier. That one is one of my favorite films of all the Studio Ghibli films, and with time has become maybe the one that I think is the best. When I first saw it, I didn't appreciate it as much, and it wasn't one of my favorite, but as I've gotten older, this one has slowly become, in my opinion, one of the strongest Studio Ghibli films. I think it has the best character development and character growth of any Studio Ghibli film. It's a film with a really beautiful, bittersweet feeling to it of growing older and looking back on your life that just resonates with you more and more the older you get. I imagine by the time I'm middle-aged, this one may be even more my favorite. And like many of the Studio Ghibli films, it is beautiful to look at. The animation's great, the voice acting's great, so it's S tier for me. So next is going to be From Up on Poppy Hill. This one was pretty solid. I'm going to put it B. It wasn't the strongest or the most memorable film, but it had some pretty good characters. It's kind of another one of those romance kind of coming of age films that Studio Ghibli does a lot, and it does it pretty well. This one's actually directed by Goro Miyazaki, who usually gets clowned on a lot for really not being as good as his father. And people usually bring up and make fun of the Tales from Earthsea movie that disappointed a lot of people. This one usually somehow seems to get forgotten all the time, but I actually think it was pretty good. I think it's a good film and definitely worth watching. And then next we have Castle in the Sky. This one I'm going to put at A tier, very close to S tier. This one is another one of the most visually stunning Studio Ghibli films and one of the most enjoyable. It's got a great sense of adventure, and it's kind of got everything that you want from a film. It's got like a lot of adventure, a little bit of, comedy and romance and everything. So this one is really good, and definitely check this one out. Next is The Wind Rises. This one is also going to go into B tier. I didn't love this one. It's another one that's not based in fantasy like some of the Studio Ghibli films are, but I don't think it's as effective as some of the other films that are also based in reality. I didn't really connect with the characters or feel for them too much in this one. It was still a solid movie, probably above average for animated films, but for Studio Ghibli's high criteria, it's probably one of the lower tier for me, but still gotta give it a B because it's above average just as far as all animated films go. Next is The Ocean Waves. This one I'm gonna put in B. It's also pretty solid as far as films go, but it's kind of a little bit more on the forgettable side, I would say, for Studio Ghibli films, but it's still quite good. It's another one of those kind of coming of age where the main characters kind of grow up and a little bit of like romance and stuff. This one's probably one of the most forgotten Studio Ghibli films that I almost never hear people talk about, and that's kind of a shame because it is also another film that's worth watching, like most Studio Ghibli films. Next is The Cat Returns. This one's a little bit of an odd film. It's actually a spin-off of the film Whisper of the Heart, which I thought was a better film. This one I would say is just kind of an average film. It wasn't really that great. I didn't really feel any attachment to the characters. It still looked really good with the animation, just like all the Studio Ghibli films. So at least it's like an average film by that criteria. But if you were going to skip a Studio Ghibli film, it's probably one of the ones that you could miss. Alright, so next is When Marnie Was Here. I'm going to put this one in B tier. Also, it's another really good film with a touching, kind of melancholic story, a really good story about friendship and everything. This one's kind of on the border of the A and B tier for me, maybe the best of the ones that I put in B tier so far. The characters in this one kind of stuck with me a little bit more, and I felt for them a little bit more than the ones in some of the other ones. Here we have the aforementioned Tales from Earthsea. This one is a really boring film. It isn't very good. I don't think it's quite as bad as a lot of people say. It's not like one of the worst films I've ever seen, but it probably is the worst Studio Ghibli film. Actually, I wouldn't say probably. It is the worst Studio Ghibli film, but it's not without any redeeming factors. I hear a lot of people really hate it because it really butchered the source material, the novels that the movie is based off of. I've never read the novels, so that didn't bother me. And speaking of bad adaptations, I'm gonna go here with Howl's Moving Castle. I hear a lot of people complain about this one also butchering the source material. I'm also not familiar with the source material on this one, so that didn't bother me. I do think that the story is a little weak, probably actually one of the weakest stories of any Studio Ghibli film, and I honestly didn't really care much for the characters. It's probably a little bit of an unpopular opinion since it seems to be one of the most beloved films, but this one I would actually say is close to C tier for me, but the visuals save it. It has some of the best visuals. The castle and everything are some of the most memorable and iconic of any Studio Ghibli work. That puts it squarely in the B tier for me, just from the visuals alone. And the music, the voice acting, animation, everything is top notch, like you expect from most of Miyazaki's works. But as far as story goes, I'd say it's one of his weakest. And here we have Grave of the Fireflies, probably famous for being one of the most depressing films of all time. This one I've kind of got in between A and B. I'll probably put it on the A tier as one of the better films. This is by far the most serious Studio Ghibli film. There's no supernatural events or aspects of this one. It just basically shows the horror of wartime through the point of view of two young children in World War II. And it's pretty brutal at times. Not to get too much into spoilers, but you really see these kids like kind of on their own after their mother is killed in a bombing raid, and they're kind of on their own trying to take care of themselves. And you kind of just see them kind of, especially the little girl, kind of starving to death throughout the film. And it's got really the most tragic ending of any film I've ever seen too. But it's very good. It's a very well done film. And it's probably like one of those must-see movies, even for people who aren't into anime or into animated movies. Next we have Arrietty. This one is one of the most forgotten films. I have almost never heard anyone even mention this one online or anything. I ended up watching this one by chance shortly after it came out, and I was actually surprised how good it was. I didn't really have too high expectations for this one. It wasn't anything amazing, but like all Studio Ghibli films, the animation and visuals were top notch, and I really kind of got invested in the characters and the story in this one, and I actually really enjoyed it. I think a lot of people should try giving this one a chance and try watching this one as well, because I feel like this one's been kind of forgotten, but it's still pretty solid. Next is Kiki's Delivery Service. This is another one of the most beloved films, another one of the Miyazaki's coming of age films, and really one of his classics. I'll put it in the A tier. I really liked it. It was actually probably the second Studio Ghibli film I saw, and it's one I saw when I was really young. It really made an impression on me. It's just like a really chill, enjoyable movie that's really solid and fun to watch. Next we have Whisper of the Heart. This one's also pretty good. This one kind of on the border of A and B for me. Put another one in the B. Once again, another Studio Ghibli coming of age film where you got the main character kind of growing up and trying to pursue their dreams and face the world around them. This one had likable characters and everything. Animation, once again, really good visuals. Not one of the most essential Studio Ghibli films, but I would say easily above average for anime films in general, and even above average for Studio Ghibli's high standard. Alright, next we have Only Yesterday. This one I've got kind of on the border of A and B, and you know, I'm going to put it in the A tier. I think this one is good enough to break into the upper echelon of Studio Ghibli films. This one is another kind of one of those films that are kind of focusing on growing up, but this one taking a point of view of a woman kind of looking back on her life, and it's got a really good character development and everything. It's just got a really like touching, kind of bittersweet, nostalgic feeling to it. It's really well done. It's another film directed by Isao Takahata, who directed The Grave of the Fireflies, and it's just another really well done, thoughtful film. It's another one that really made an impression on me, so I would say this one's definitely a must watch. I don't think enough people have seen this one. I don't see people mention this one nearly as much, probably because it's not directed by Miyazaki, but it shouldn't be overlooked. Next is My Neighbor Totoro. This one is another really good classic, kind of on the border of A and B for me. I'll put it in A. It's just really classic and fun. It's got one of the most iconic creatures designed by Miyazaki in Totoro. Also, you have like a cat bus later in the film. Just a really lighthearted, fun film. It's just another classic film that made Miyazaki basically the biggest director in anime. Next we have Pompoko. This one's another good one, directed by Takahata. It's one of the lesser known films. Pretty good. It's a one with a kind of environmental edge where a family of tanukis try to keep humans from destroying their forest home. It's a pretty well done film. It's got a nice animation style and it's pretty enjoyable to watch. It's probably not one of the most essential films, but one I think is worth giving a look at. Next is My Neighbor the Yamadas. This one's like a light-hearted family film. It's pretty good. I'll put it in B tier as well. It's another good one directed by Takahata. It's a little change of pace from most of the Studio Ghibli films. The animation style and the look of the film doesn't look like any of the other Studio Ghibli films, but shouldn't overlook it just because of that. It's still an enjoyable film. It's got some good comedy and a good message about the importance of family. Next we have Ponyo. This one, I always hear mixed things about it. I've got it right on the border of A and B. I'll put it in the B because I didn't love the story that much. I think it's got some of the best animation of any Studio Ghibli film though. I don't think people talk about it enough, but a lot of the underwater scenes just are so beautiful to look at. I think they're just really incredibly done, and visually it's pretty close to my favorite film. Maybe I would say at least top 3 just in terms of visuals. The story is a little bit more forgettable. The characters really didn't make too much of an impact on me like some of the other ones, so that keeps it out of the A tier, but I still think it's very good. Next we have Kaguya Hime. So this one's a take on the story from Japanese folklore, and I won't get into the whole plot of the story, but it's a pretty classic story from Japanese folklore. It's a really good interpretation of this. It's another one by Takahata, and he always seems to deliver on his films as well. I think he needs a little bit more recognition on the level of Hayao Miyazaki, since I think too many people kind of think of Studio Ghibli as simply Miyazaki films, but Takahata's films are also very good. He's definitely one of the best directors in animated films, period. So this is another good one. I love the visual style. It's got a really kind of beautiful like watercolor kind of style to it that makes it visually stunning. It's another one everyone should give a watch to. Next we got another real classic. It's Mononoke Hime. This one's gonna go straight to the S tier for me. Very well may be the best visuals in a Studio Ghibli film. Characters are really memorable. This one's probably the most classic and has one of the more memorable plots in Miyazaki's films. This one has some of the best music in any of the films. The animation is top notch once again, but probably the best that I've seen in Studio Ghibli films. A lot of the forest scenes and the creatures and stuff that are in there are really beautiful to look at and really memorable. It may be the most definitive and the most must-watch Studio Ghibli film. So if you happen to have not watched this one yet, definitely give this one a watch for sure. But I'm pretty sure most people have seen this one, especially if you're looking up a video on Studio Ghibli films. This one's probably the most famous, as well as the next one that we have, which is Spirited Away. This one I've got kind of on the border of A and S. Of the 3 I have in S, it's probably my 3rd favorite. I'm gonna put it in S just because it's so memorable for me. It was the first Studio Ghibli film I've seen, and was the first animated film I've seen that was not something like Dragon Ball Z or One Piece or something like that. When I saw it, it just blew my mind. The designs of the creatures and the atmosphere and everything was on a whole nother level from anything I'd ever seen before. In this film, you have the main character who gets spirited away to another world, and it really is an incredible world she goes to. The animation is just really stunning. The first time I saw it, I was just blown away. I had no idea what to expect. Like, everything that came up was just so bizarre and weird, but incredible to look at. I couldn't look away. And there's extreme few things in any media that had quite the impression that this film had on me. The thing that I would say keeps it from being the actual best film that Studio Ghibli has ever done is that the story is probably not my favorite. Most of the story is just the journey. There's not like really a lot of plot. It's just basically the girl trying to find her way home when she gets sent to this other world. Hey, wait a minute. Another world? Does that mean this is an isekai? No, never mind. Let's just forget about that. But really, it is definitely one of the best films I've seen. Definite S tier. And next we have Nausicaa. This one's on the border of A and S for me. I'm going to put it in A, but with the caveat that had the entire story from Miyazaki's manga been adapted into a film, maybe like a second part, and completed the story, this one may be the best. But as it is, I read the manga actually before I watched the movie, so it kind of skewed my view of it a bit, because I think the manga tells the story a little bit better. The movie only tells half the story, the first half of the story, and I think the character development of Nausicaa herself, but definitely the side characters other than Nausicaa, all the other characters are way more developed in the manga, and if you get the full story, it just makes the characters and the plot so much better. Visually, it's another one that's really beautiful. It's got a great message, great characters. Nausicaa's probably one of the best heroines from any of Miyazaki's films. So this one's really on the border of A and S. If it had a part 2 that completed the story, it would be S for me for sure. And this one I actually think is not actually a Studio Ghibli film. It was directed by Miyazaki shortly before the founding of Studio Ghibli, but it's okay that it's on here. And if we're including pre-Studio Ghibli Miyazaki films, the Lupin III Castle of Cagliostro movie would probably be an S tier for me too. It's one of my favorite animated films of all time. It's really got everything. It has action, comedy, romance. It's got everything you want. It's just a really fun film. So if you haven't seen that one, watch that one also. So that's my Studio Ghibli tier list. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you've watched this far, please like my video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos. It would really mean a lot to me. So thank you.